Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share Dogman encounter horror stories. First story, the Dogman. Northeast PA Dogman encounter. I have shared this story in previous threads as part of the general conversation. I haven't made an individual post until now. I'm a little bit older than most folks here. Mea culpa. I am posting for mobile, so I'll try to be brief and to the point. Also, I need to leave the name of the specific town out, as it would be a dead giveaway to my IRL identity. I've always been into the paranormal, as most of us that visit this thread are. In January 2019, I noticed something lumbering down my driveway. The window I was looking out faces over and above the drive, if that's clear. For example, I can see the roof of your car, but not always the bottom of the tire. Regardless, I notice movement. I look out and see what I initially thought was a bear, nose to the ground, kind of snuffling its head side to side, casually walking down the drive on all fours. A little geographical clarity. I live in town. The front of my neighborhood faces a major highway, but the back is all state game lands. I've seen some wildlife, turkeys, a deer here and there, and every skunk in the county apparently lives on my street. I don't see many squirrels, groundhogs, or chipmunks, which is a bit odd. I'm not very far from the city of Scranton, enjoy office fans, about 7 miles from downtown, so I'm not exactly in the sticks. I watch this bear mosey down toward the street, its head lowered. I move from the living room window to my bedroom window that has a full view of the street. Sure enough, here it comes, but something is wrong. I watch this not bear stand on 2 legs and casually walk out into the road. I see pointed ears and a long snout. It's got its head raised, smelling the air. I felt pee run down my legs. This was no bear. I saw it in perfect silhouette under the yellow streetlight. It was either dark gray or black. The yellow light threw off the true color. It stood without effort, looked like one fluid movement. It then walked across the road, casual as you please, and kind of hunkered down in some scrub brush. I'm not sure what kind of brush, but it's like forsythia, all tangled and thick. Then I realized it was looking right into my bedroom. It had blue eyes. I'm not sure if that was reflected light or they were glowing. It looked right at me. I lost my legs at that moment and sat down under my window, absolutely panicked. I was home alone with 5 cats and a dog who slept through the whole thing. I didn't know what to do. My window is a big picture window, and if it wanted me, it easily could have gotten me. I cautiously got on my knees to peek over the sill, and I lost it. Didn't see eyes or it anywhere. It seemed to be either moving away from the forest behind my house, or it decided to rest up in that scrub brush. What I saw under the street light is as follows: darkish fur, high pointed ears, long muzzle. I never saw teeth or if it had a tail. It had hands with long claws that hung kind of limp wrist. If they were fully extended, they would hang below the knee. It walked digitigrade on dog legs. It looked heavily muscled, but had a tapered waist. It was about 7 to 7'1/2 feet tall, judging from where it stood in relation to the streetlight. It was non-aggressive, even when I felt it look right at me. I was terrified, but I didn't get a sense that it was pissed off it had been seen, as some people report. I didn't take a picture because I simply didn't think to. I was in a fair amount of shock, and I'm sure I'll eat shit for this, but sometimes your phone is the absolute last thing on your mind. The next day, I called Vic Cundiff of Dogman Encounters Radio. His advice was solid, and I try and remember it when I have to go out at night. There have been some odd sounds tapping at my window. I can hear scratching of the siding. I don't see that many animals around the neighborhood. There used to be about 7 stray cats I fed. All gone. Once the weather broke, it's been quiet. I installed motion lights and bought 2 game cameras. I'm hoping they're in a sense like Sasquatch. They avoid game cams. I don't ever want to see this thing again. Those of you who want to see one, pray you never do. My encounter was non-aggressive. I can't imagine having to deal with this thing pissed off. I still can't sleep a full night, and every sound scares the hell out of me after dark. I live alone, and the .357 I own would probably just ruffle its fur. Thank you for taking the time to read this. It was a terrifying animal to see. I hope I never see it again, but sadly that wasn't in the cards. I'll post that story another time. Be careful out there, rando Redditors. You never know what's out there waiting. Another disturbing thought. If Dogman is real, what else is? Second story. My dad and I hunted down the Dogman that killed my sister. I've always hated the smell of gun oil. It clings to everything it touches, soaking deep into the fibers of my clothes, the lining of my backpack, the coarse hair on the back of my hands. Yet here I am, kneeling on the cracked linoleum of our mudroom, a Remington .308 laid across my thighs, and the stench of gun oil sharp in my nostrils. The early morning light barely scratches at the edges of the blinds, dim and gray like the belly of a dead fish. My dad, Frank, is in the kitchen, clattering around with the coffee pot and mumbling under his breath. Today we're heading up to the woods of northern Michigan, same as we did every year before Leah, before we lost her. I can't help but feel the old scars throbbing as I load bullets into the magazine. It's been 10 years since that hunting trip, the one that tore my family into before and after. Before, when Leah's laughter was a constant soundtrack to our lives. After, when every silence was filled with her absence. We were just kids back then. I was 10, Leah was 8. It was supposed to be a typical hunting trip, one of those bonding experiences Dad was always talking about. But things went wrong. We got separated from Dad somehow. One minute we were following him, the next we were lost, the dense woods closing in around us. Dad says when he found me, I was huddled under a fallen tree, my eyes wide, my body frozen. All I could mutter through chattering teeth was Dogman. It was only later, after the search parties had combed through every thicket and hollow, that they found her. What remained of Leah was barely recognizable, the evidence of a brutal mauling undeniable. The authorities concluded it was likely a bear attack, but Dad, he never accepted that explanation. He had seen the tracks, too large and oddly shaped for any bear. As I load another round, the memory flashes, unbidden and unwelcome. Large, hairy clawed hands reaching out towards us, impossibly big, grotesque in their form. Yet, the rest of the creature eludes me, a shadow just beyond the edge of my recall, leaving me with nothing but fragmented terrors and Leah's haunting, echoing screams. My mind blocked most of it out, a self-defense mechanism, I guess. 4 years after that day, sleep was a battleground. I'd wake up in strange places, kitchen floor, backyard, even at the edge of the nearby creek. My therapist said it was my mind's way of trying to resolve the unresolved, to wander back through the woods searching for Leah. But all I found in those sleepless nights was a deeper sense of loss. It took time, a lot of therapy and patience I didn't know I had, but the sleepwalking did eventually stop. I guess I started to find some semblance of peace. I have mostly moved on with my life. The fragmentary memories of that day are still there, lurking in the corners of my mind, but they don't dominate my thoughts like they used to. I just finished my sophomore year at Michigan State, majoring in environmental science. As for Dad, the loss of Leah broke him. He became a shell of himself. It destroyed his marriage with Mom. He blamed himself for letting us out of his sight, for not protecting Leah. His life took on a single, consuming focus, finding the creature that killed her. He read every book, every article on cryptids and unexplained phenomena. He mapped sightings, connected dots across blurry photos and shaky testimonies of the Dogman. But as the 10th anniversary of Leah's death approaches, Dad's obsession has grown more intense. He started staying up late, poring over his maps and notes, muttering to himself about patterns and cycles. He's convinced that the Dogman reappears every 10 years, and this is our window of opportunity to finally hunt it down. I'm not nearly as convinced. The whole Dogman thing seems like a coping mechanism, a way for Dad to channel his guilt and grief into something tangible, something he can fight against. But I decided to tag along on this trip, partly to keep an eye on him, partly because a small part of me hopes that maybe, just maybe, we'll find some kind of closure out there in the woods. I finished loading the rifle and set it aside, standing up to stretch my legs. I wiped my greasy hands on an old rag, trying to get rid of the smell. The early morning light is starting to seep into the room, casting long shadows across the floor. Dad comes out of the kitchen with 2 thermoses of coffee in hand. His eyes are bleary and tired. "You ready, Ryan?" he asks, handing me a thermos, his voice rough from too many sleepless nights. "Yeah, I'm ready," I reply, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We load our gear into the truck, the weight of our supplies and weapons a physical reminder of the burden we carry. The drive from Lansing across the lower peninsula is long and quiet, the silence between us filled with unspoken memories and unresolved grief. The drive north is a blur of highway lines and the dull hum of the engine. I drift off, the landscape outside blending into a haze. In my sleep, fragments of that day with Leah replay like scattered pieces of a puzzle. I see her smile, the way she tugged at my sleeve, eager to explore. The sunlight filters through the trees in sharp, jagged streaks. Then the memory shifts, darker, disjointed. Leah's voice echoes, a playful laugh turning into a scream that pierces the air. The crunch of leaves underfoot as something heavy moves through the underbrush. I see a shadow, large and looming, not quite fitting the shapes of any creature I know. Then something darker creeps into the dream, something I've never allowed myself to remember clearly. Before I can see what it is, I wake up with a start as the truck jerks slightly on a rough patch of road. Dad glances over. "Bad dream?" he asks. I nod, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, the remnants of the dream clinging to me like the cold. "Yeah, just thinking about Leah," I manage to say. As we drive, Dad attempts to bridge the silence with small talk. He asks about my finals, my plans for the summer, anything to keep the conversation going. His voice carries a forced cheerfulness, but it's clear his heart isn't in it. I respond when necessary, my answers brief, my gaze fixed on the passing scenery. The landscape changes as we head further north, from flat expanses to rolling hills dotted with dense patches of forest. It's beautiful country, the kind that reminds you how vast and wild Michigan can be, but today it just feels oppressive, like it's closing in on us. We finally arrive at the cabin, nestled deep in the woods, its weathered wood blending seamlessly with the surrounding trees. The place hasn't changed much since the last time I was here, a relic from another time, filled with the echoes of our past. I can still see Leah running around the porch, her laughter ringing out into the forest. Dad parks the truck, and we step out into the crisp air. The smell of pine and damp earth fills my nostrils. We start unloading our gear, the tension between us palpable. "Let's get this inside," Dad says, his voice gruff as he hefts a duffel bag onto his shoulder. I nod, grabbing my own bag and following him to the cabin. Inside, it's a mix of old and new, the same rustic furniture, but with new hunting gear and maps strewn across the table. Dad's obsession is evident in every corner of the room, a constant reminder of why we're here. As we unpack, we exchange strained attempts at normalcy. He talks about the latest cryptid sightings he's read about, his eyes lighting up with a fervor that both worries and saddens me. "Did you hear about the sighting up near Alpena?" he asks, laying out his maps on the table. Yeah, you mentioned it, I reply, trying to muster some enthusiasm. Do you really think there's something to it? Dad's eyes meet mine, and for a moment, I see a flicker of doubt. But it's quickly replaced by grim determination. I have to believe it, Ryan. It's the only thing that makes sense. We finish unpacking, the silence between us growing heavier with each passing minute. I step outside to clear my head, the cool air a welcome relief. The sun is starting to set, casting long shadows across the clearing. I can't shake the feeling of unease. You can take the upstairs room, Dad mutters. His voice is strained, trying to sound normal, but it's clear the weight of the past is heavy on him. I nod, hauling my backpack up the creaking stairs to the small bedroom that I used to share with Leah. The room feels smaller now, or maybe I've just grown too much since those innocent days. I unpack silently, setting my things aside. The bed is stiff and cold under my touch. As I settle in, I can't help but glance at the corner where Leah and I would huddle together, whispering secrets and making plans for adventures that would never happen. I push the thoughts away, focusing on the practicalities of unpacking. After settling in, I go back downstairs to find Dad loading up a backpack with supplies for our hunt. The intensity in his eyes is palpable, his hands moving with practiced precision. I know this routine. It's one he's perfected over countless solo trips since that fateful day. We'll head out early, he says, not looking up from his task. Gotta make the most of the daylight. I nod, though unease curls in my stomach. I'm not just worried about what we might find, or not find, out there. I'm worried about him. Each year, the obsession seems to carve him out a bit more, leaving less of the Dad I knew. The morning air is sharp with the scent of pine and wet earth as Dad and I head into the deeper parts of the forest. The terrain is rugged, familiar in its untamed beauty, but there's a tension between us that makes the landscape feel alien. Dad moves with a purposeful stride, his eyes scanning the woods around us. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the underbrush seems to draw his attention. He's on edge, and it puts me on edge too. As we walk, my mind drifts back to that day 10 years ago. I can almost hear Leah's voice echoing through the trees, her high-pitched call as she darted ahead. Catch me, Ryan. I remember how the sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the ground. Those memories are so vivid, so tangible. It feels like I could just turn a corner and see her there, waiting for us. Dad suddenly stops and kneels, examining the ground. He points out a set of tracks that are too large for a deer, with an unusual gait pattern. It's been here, Ree. I'm telling you, it's close. He whispers, a mixture of excitement and something darker in his voice. I nod, though I'm not sure what to believe. Part of me wants to dismiss it all as grief-fueled obsession, but another part, the part that heard Leah's scream and saw something monstrous in the woods that day, isn't so sure. As we continue, Dad's comments become increasingly cryptic. You know, they say the Dogman moves in cycles, drawn to certain places, certain times, like it's tied to the land itself. He muses more to himself than to me. His fixation on the creature has always been intense, but now it borders on mania. We set up a makeshift blind near a clearing where Dad insists the creature will pass. Hours drag by with little to see but the occasional bird or distant deer. The sun rises higher in the sky, casting long, slender shadows through the dense canopy. I shift uncomfortably in my spot, the forest floor hard and unyielding beneath me. My eyes dart between the trees, hoping to catch a glimpse of something, anything, to break the monotony. Dad, on the other hand, remains steadfast, his gaze fixed on the tree-line as if he can will the Dogman into existence by sheer force of will. A bird chirps nearby, startling me. I sigh and adjust my grip on the rifle. I glance over at Dad. Anything, I ask, more out of boredom than genuine curiosity. Not yet, he replies, his voice tight. But it's out there. I know it. I nod, even though I'm not sure I believe him. The forest seems too quiet, too still. Maybe we're chasing ghosts. As the sun begins its descent, the forest is bathed in a warm, golden light. The air cools, and a breeze rustles the leaves. I shiver, more from anticipation than the cold. The long hours of sitting and waiting are starting to wear on me. Let's call it a day for now, Dad says finally, his voice heavy with disappointment. We'll head back to the cabin, get some rest, and try again tomorrow. I stand and stretch, feeling the stiffness in my muscles. We pack up our gear in silence and start the trek back to the cabin. The walk is long and quiet. The only sounds are the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant calls of birds settling in for the night. Dinner is a quiet affair, both of us lost in our thoughts. I try to make small talk, asking Dad about his plans for tomorrow, but feels forced. We clean up in silence. After dinner, I retreat to the small bedroom. The fatigue from the day's hike has settled in my bones, but sleep still feels like a distant hope. I lie down, staring at the ceiling, the room cloaked in darkness, save for the sliver of moonlight creeping through the window. Downstairs, I hear the faint sound of Dad moving around, likely unable to sleep himself. I drift into sleep, but it's not restful. My dreams pull me back to that fateful day in the woods. Leah's voice is clear and vibrant, her laughter echoing through the trees. She looks just as she did then, bright-eyed and full of life, her blonde hair catching the sunlight as she runs ahead of me. Come on, Ree. You can't catch me, she taunts, her voice playful and teasing. I chase after her, but the scene shifts abruptly. The sky darkens, the woods around us growing dense and foreboding. Leah's laughter fades, replaced by a chilling silence. I see her ahead, standing still, her back to me. Leah, I call out, my voice trembling. She turns slowly, her eyes wide and filled with fear. Ryan, you have to remember, she says, her voice barely a whisper. It wasn't what you think. You need to know the truth. Leah's words hang in the air, cryptic and unsettling. Before I can respond, she turns and starts running again, her figure becoming a blur among the trees. Panic rises in my chest as I sprint after her, my feet pounding against the forest floor. Leah, wait! I shout, desperation lacing my voice. The forest around me seems to close in, the trees towering and twisted, shadows dancing menacingly in the dim light. I push forward, trying to keep her in sight, but she's too fast, slipping away like a wisp of smoke. Suddenly, there's a rustle, a flash of movement in the corner of my vision. Leah screams, a sound that pierces through the heavy silence. It happens too quickly. I can't see what it is, only a dark blur that snatches her up. Leah, I scream, my voice breaking. I stumble, falling to my knees as the forest spins around me. My heart races, and the terror is so real, so visceral, that it pulls me back to that awful day, the one that changed everything. I jolt awake, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I sit up, wiping the cold sweat from my forehead as I try to steady my breathing. The room is still dark. The shadows cast by the moonlight seem to flicker and dance on the walls. My heart is still racing from the nightmare, the echo of Leah's scream lingering in my ears. As I struggle to calm down, the floorboards outside my room creak. The door opens slowly, and I see the silhouette of my dad in the doorway, a Bowie knife in his hand, his posture tense. Dad, what the hell are you doing? I whisper, my voice shaking. Shoo! He hisses, holding up a hand to silence me. I heard something moving around in the cabin. Stay quiet. I swallow hard, my mouth dry. I glance at the clock on the nightstand. It's just past 3 in the morning. The cabin is silent, the kind of deep, oppressive silence that makes every small sound seem louder. I can't hear anything out of the ordinary, but Dad's expression is deadly serious. He motions for me to get up, and I do, moving as quietly as I can. My heart is racing, a mix of lingering fear from the dream and the sudden, sharp anxiety of the present moment. Dad leads the way, stepping cautiously out of the bedroom and into the hallway, the knife held ready in front of him. We move through the cabin, checking each room in turn. The living room is empty, the furniture casting long shadows in the dim moonlight. The kitchen is just as we left it, the plates from dinner still drying on the counter. Everything seems normal, untouched. We finish our sweep of the cabin without finding anything amiss. The silence is heavy, punctuated only by our soft footfalls. I can see the tension in Dad's frame, his grip on the knife unwavering. After checking the last room, we pause in the dimly lit hallway, the air thick with unspoken questions. "There's nothing here," I say, my voice low. "Are you sure you heard something?" He looks at me, his eyes searching for something in my face. I heard growling, deep and close. It was right outside the window. Maybe it was just an animal outside, a raccoon or something, I suggest, although the certainty in his voice makes me doubt my own reassurance. No, it wasn't like that. It was different. He insists, his voice tense. I nod, not wanting to argue, but the seeds of worry are planted deep. The look in his eyes sends a chill down my spine. It's not just fear, it's desperation. The kind of desperation that comes from years of chasing shadows and finding nothing. I can see the toll this hunt has taken on him, the way it's worn him down, turned him into a man I barely recognize. We head back to our rooms. As I lie down, my mind races with thoughts of my dad. I can't help but wonder if he's losing it, if the years of grief and guilt have finally pushed him over the edge. Dad wasn't always like this. Before Leah's death, he was the kind of father who took us fishing, helped with homework, and told terrible jokes that made us groan and laugh at the same time. He was solid, dependable, but losing Leah changed him. The guilt twisted him into someone I barely recognize, someone driven by a need for answers, for closure, that may never come. I try to sleep, but my thoughts keep me awake. I can hear Dad moving around downstairs, probably pacing or double-checking the locks. His paranoia has become a constant presence, and I don't know how to help him. I don't even know if I can help him. The next morning, the sunlight filters weakly through the cabin windows, casting a pale light that does little to lift the heavy mood. I drag myself out of bed, feeling the exhaustion of another restless night. Dad is already up, hunched over his maps at the kitchen table, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Morning," I mumble, rubbing the sleep from my eyes as I pour myself a cup of coffee. "Did you sleep at all?" He shakes his head, not looking up from his notes. "Not much. I couldn't stop thinking about what I heard last night." I sip my coffee, trying to shake off the remnants of my nightmare. "Maybe it was just an animal, Dad. We're deep in the woods, after all." He finally looks up, his eyes intense. "Ryan, I know what I heard. It wasn't just an animal. It was something else." I sigh, not wanting to argue. "Okay, fine, Dad. What's the plan for today?" "We're going back out. I found some tracks yesterday, and I want to follow them, see where they lead." I nod, feeling a mix of apprehension and resignation. I can see how much this means to him, how desperate he is for any kind of lead. "All right, let's get packed and head out." We spend the morning preparing, loading up our gear and double-checking our supplies. Dad is meticulous, going over everything with a fine-toothed comb. I try to match his focus, but my mind keeps drifting back to Leah and the dream I had. Her words echo in my head, cryptic and unsettling, You need to know the truth. We set off into the woods, the air crisp and cool. The forest is alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves, but it all feels distant, like background noise to the tension between us. Dad leads the way, his eyes scanning the ground for any sign of the tracks he found yesterday. As we walk, I can't help but notice how erratically he's acting. He mutters to himself, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to jump out at us. His grip on his rifle is tight, his knuckles white. "Dad, are you okay?" I ask, trying to keep my voice steady. He glances at me, his expression unreadable. "I'm fine, just focused." He stops frequently to examine the ground or the bark of trees, pointing out marks and signs that seem meaningless to me. "Look at this," he says, crouching down to examine a broken branch. "See how it snapped? That's not a deer or a bear. That's something bigger, stronger." I crouch next to Dad, squinting at the broken branch. To me, it just looks like a regular broken branch, the kind you see all over the forest. "I don't know, Dad. It just looks like a branch to me," I say, trying to keep my voice neutral. Dad's eyes flicker with frustration. "You're not looking close enough. It's the way it snapped. Too clean, too deliberate. Something did this." I nod, not wanting to argue. "Okay, sure. But even if you're right, it could be anything. A storm, another hunter." His expression hardens. "I know what I'm looking for. This is different." I sigh, feeling the weight of the past and the tension between us pressing down on me. "Dad, I had a dream last night. About Leah." The words hang in the air between us, heavy and fraught with unspoken emotions. Dad's eyes widen, and he straightens up, his entire demeanor shifting. "What kind of dream? What did you see?" His voice is urgent, almost desperate. "It was strange. We were in the woods like we are now, but everything felt different. Leah was there, running ahead of me, laughing. Then she stopped and told me I needed to know the truth, that it wasn't what I thought." Dad grabs my shoulders, his grip tight. "What else did she say? Did she tell you anything specific? Anything about the creature?" I shake my head, feeling a chill run down my spine. "No, that was it. She just said I needed to know the truth, and then she was gone." Dad's grip on my shoulders tightens, and his eyes bore into mine with a mixture of desperation and hope. "Ryan, you have to try to remember. Think hard. What did the creature look like? Did you see anything else?" I pull back slightly, uneasy with his intensity. "Dad, I told you. I don't remember. It was just a dream. A nightmare, really. My mind probably just mixing things up." He lets go of me and runs a hand through his hair, looking frustrated and lost. "Dreams can be important. They can hold memories we've buried deep. Please try to remember. This could be a sign, a clue." I rub my temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache. "I've tried, okay? I've tried for years to piece together what happened that day. But it's all just fragments, like pieces of a puzzle that don't fit. The dream, it felt real, but I don't think it's telling me anything new." Dad's face falls, and he looks older than I've ever seen him. He turns away, staring into the forest as if it holds all the answers. As we make our way back to the cabin, the sun begins to set, casting long shadows through the trees. The air grows colder, and I shiver, pulling my jacket tighter around me. Dad is silent, lost in his thoughts, his face drawn and haggard. Back at the cabin, we unload our gear once again in silence. Dad disappears into his room, muttering something about going over his notes. I decide to explore the cabin, hoping to find something that might help me understand what's going on with him. In the attic, I find a box of old family photos and documents. As I sift through the contents, I come across a worn journal with Dad's handwriting on the cover. Curiosity gets the better of me, and I open it, flipping through the pages. The journal is filled with notes and sketches, detailing his obsession with the Dogman. But there's something else. Entries that talk about Leah, about that day in the woods. His handwriting becomes more erratic, the words harder to read. One entry stands out, dated just a few days after Leah's death. June 15th, 2013, it was supposed to be a normal trip. Keep them close, frank, I kept telling myself. But I failed. Leah is gone, and it's my fault. I heard her scream, saw the shadows. I tried to get to her, but the thing was there. Too fast, too strong. My hands, blood everywhere. No one will believe me. I can't even believe myself. I have to find it. I have to protect Ryan. I have to make it right. God, what have I done? Before I can read further, the attic door creaks open, and Dad's voice slices through the stillness. What are you doing up here? His tone is sharp, almost panicked. I turn to see him standing in the doorway, his face pale and his eyes wide with something between anger and fear. I clutch the journal to my chest, my mind racing. I found this. I was just trying to understand. In an instant, he crosses the room and snatches the journal from my hands. His grip is tight, his knuckles white. You had no right, he growls, his voice trembling. Dad, I just wanted to know the truth. I shout, frustration boiling over. What really happened to Leah? His eyes flash with a mix of rage and anguish, and before I can react, he slaps me across the face. The force of it knocks me off balance, and I stumble backward, my cheeks stinging. For a moment, there's a stunned silence. We both stand there, breathing hard, the air thick with tension. I'm sorry, Dad says finally, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean to. He trails off, clutching the journal to his chest like a lifeline. I touch my cheek, feeling the heat from the slap, and take a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Dad, what aren't you telling me? What really happened that day? Stay out of it. Ryan, Dad growls, his eyes dark with anger. You don't know what you're messing with. He turns and storms out of the attic. I'm left standing there, my cheek throbbing, my mind racing. What is going on? What really happened to Leah? And what is Dad so afraid of? That night, I sleep with my rifle within arm's reach, more afraid of my dad than any dogman. The slap still burns on my cheek, and the look in his eyes, rage, fear, something darker, haunts me. I lie awake, listening to the creaks and groans of the old cabin, every sound amplified in the stillness. Eventually, exhaustion pulls me under, and I fall into a restless sleep. The dream returns, vivid and unsettling. I'm back in the woods, chasing after Leah. Her laughter echoes through the trees, a haunting reminder of happier times. This time, though, I push myself harder, refusing to let her slip away. Ryan, catch me, she calls, her voice playful. I'm coming, Leah. I shout, my legs pumping, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest around us is a twisted, shadowy maze, the trees seeming to close in on us. Leah's figure becomes clearer, her blonde hair catching the dim light filtering through the canopy. She stops suddenly, turning to face me, her eyes wide with fear. Leah, what is it? I ask, my voice trembling. Look behind you, she whispers, her voice barely audible. I turn slowly, dread creeping on my spine. In the shadows, I see a figure, its form indistinct and shifting. It's not quite animal, not quite human, something in between. The sight of it sends a jolt of terror through me, and I wake up with a start, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I'm not in my bed. The ground beneath me is cold and hard, the smell of damp earth filling my nostrils. Panic rises as I realize I've sleepwalked into the woods. I scramble to my feet, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The moon casts a pale glow over the surroundings, revealing what looks like a long-abandoned animal lair. The walls are covered in giant claw marks, deep gouges in the wood and earth. The air is heavy with the scent of decay, and a chill runs through me. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Carefully, I start to move, my eyes scanning the ground, desperate for a familiar landmark. That's when I see them, faded scraps of fabric caught on the jagged edges of the underbrush. My steps falter, a sense of dread washing over me as I bend down to examine them. The fabric is torn, weathered by time and the elements, but unmistakably familiar. It's part of Leah's jacket, the bright pink one she wore on the day she disappeared. As I strain to make sense of it all, a rustling sound behind me snaps my focus. My heart leaps into my throat. I spin around, my hand instinctively reaching for the rifle I don't have, because of course I didn't bring it in my unconscious state. The shadowy figure that emerges from the trees is unsettlingly familiar, mirroring the menacing forms of my nightmares. But as it steps into the moonlight, I recognize the worn jacket, the weary posture. It's Dad. Ryan, he calls out, his voice a mix of relief and stern concern. I've been looking everywhere for you. What the hell are you doing out here? I exhale slowly, the terror ebbing away as reality sets back in. I don't know, Dad. I must have sleepwalked again. My voice is shaky, my earlier dream still clinging to the edges of my consciousness. Dad stares at me in disbelief. You haven't sleepwalked since you were a kid, Ree. This isn't just a coincidence. His eyes dart around, taking in the surroundings, the eerie, claw-marked den, the unsettling quiet of the woods. How did you even find this place? I shake my head, struggling to find an answer. I don't know, Dad. I woke up here. The uncertainty in my voice does nothing to ease the tension. His eyes lock onto the tattered remains of Leah's jacket in my hands, and something inside him snaps. The color drains from his face as he stumbles a few steps backward. This is where it happened, he murmurs, his voice barely a whisper. This is where we found Leah. I thought you said you don't remember anything from that night, he says accusingly. I swear, Dad, I don't know anything about this place. I insist, my own heart pounding. It was you, wasn't it? You've been hiding this from me. His voice is frantic. Last night, the growling, it was you. His voice rises, tinged with hysteria. I step back, my pulse racing, feeling the chill of the night and the weight of his accusation. Dad, I don't know what you're talking of. No, he interrupts, his voice breaking as he points a trembling finger at me. You knew, you always knew. It was you, Ryan. All these years, the evidence was right there, but I refused to see it. You were the Dogman. You killed Leah. His words hit me like a physical blow, absurd and horrifying in their implications. Dad, you're not making any sense. You're talking crazy. I was just a little kid. How could I protest, my voice shaky. He steps closer, his presence looming over me, the outline of his figure distorted by the shadows of the trees. Think about it. It all makes sense now. You led us here, to this place, because you remember. Because you did it. Dad, stop it. I shout, my heart pounding in my chest. You're scaring me. You need help, professional help. This isn't you. But he's beyond reason, his eyes wild with a haunted grief. I have to end this, he mutters, more to himself than to me, his hand tightening around his rifle. His finger hovers dangerously over the trigger of his rifle. My instincts kick in, and I know I have to act fast. I lunge toward him, trying to knock the weapon away, but he's quicker than I expected. We struggle, our breaths heavy in the cold night air, the sounds of our scuffle the only noise in the otherwise silent woods. His strength surprises me, fueled by his frantic emotions. He shoves me back, and I stumble over a root, my balance lost for a crucial second. That's all he needs. He raises his rifle, his intentions clear in his wild, pained eyes. I dive to the ground just as the shot rings out, a deafening blast that echoes ominously through the trees. The bullet whizzes past, narrowly missing me, embedding itself in the bark of an old pine. I scramble to my feet, my heart pounding in my ears, and I start running. The underbrush claws at my clothes and skin, but I push through, driven by a primal urge to survive. "Dad, stop! It's me, Ryan." I shout back as I dodge between the trees. Another shot breaks the silence, closer this time, sending splinters of wood flying from a nearby tree trunk. It's surreal, being hunted by my own father, a man tormented by grief and lost in his delusions. I don't stop to look back. I can hear him crashing through the forest behind me, his heavy breaths and muttered curses carried on the wind. The terrain is rough, and I'm fueled by adrenaline, but exhaustion is setting in. I need a plan. Ahead, I see a rocky outcrop and make a split-second decision to head for it. It offers a chance to hide, to catch my breath, and maybe reason with him if he catches up. As I reach the rocks, I slip behind the largest one, my body pressed tight against the cold, damp surface. I hear his footsteps approaching, slow and cautious now. As I press against the rock, trying to calm my racing heart, I can hear Dad's footsteps drawing closer, each step crunching ominously on the forest floor. He's methodical, deliberate, like a hunter stalking his prey. "Come out, Ryan." Dad's voice is ragged, filled with a blend of fury and pain. My heart pounds against my chest, the cold sweat on my back making me shiver against the rough surface of the rock. I know I can't just sit here. It's only a matter of time before he finds me. Taking a deep breath, I peek around the edge of the rock, trying to gauge his position. I see him, rifle raised, scanning the area slowly. This might be my only chance to end this madness without further violence. I need to disarm him, to talk some sense into him if I can. As quietly as I can, I move out from behind the rock, my steps careful to avoid any twigs or leaves that might betray my position. I'm almost upon him when a branch snaps under my foot. A sound so trivial, yet so alarmingly loud in the quiet of the woods. Dad whirls around, looking completely unhinged. "Ryan," he exclaims, his rifle swinging in my direction. Panic overtakes me, and I lunge forward, my hands reaching for the gun. We struggle, the rifle between us, our breaths heavy and erratic. "Dad, please stop." I plead, try to wrestle the gun away. But he's strong, stronger than I expected. In the chaos, the rifle goes off. The sound is deafening, a sharp echo that seems to reverberate off every tree around us. Pain explodes in my abdomen, sharp and burning, like nothing I've ever felt before. I stagger back, my hands instinctively go into the wound. The warmth of my own blood coats my fingers, stark and terrifying. Dad drops the rifle, his eyes wide with horror. "Oh my God, what have I done?" he gasps, rushing to my side as I collapse onto the forest floor. As the pain sears through me, a strange, overpowering energy surges within. It's wild, primal, unlike anything I've ever experienced. Looking down in horror, my hands are no longer hands but large, hairy, clawed appendages. The transformation is rapid, consuming. My vision blurs, senses heighten, and a raw, guttural growl builds in my throat. In that moment, a flood of understanding washes over me, mingling with the horror of realization. These are the hands of the creature from my nightmares, the creature whose face I can never fully recall because, as I now understand, it is me. What happens next feels detached, as if I'm no longer in control of my own actions, watching from a distance as my body moves on its own. I turn towards my dad, his face a mask of terror. He stumbles back, his eyes wide with the dawning realization of what his son has become. The forest around us seems to fall silent, holding its breath as the nightmarish scene unfolds. I can hear my own growls, guttural and deep, filling the air with a sound that's both foreign and intimately familiar. The pain in my abdomen fuels a dark, violent urge, an urge that's too strong to resist. With a ferocity that feels both alien and intrinsic, I move towards him. My dad, paralyzed by fear and shock, doesn't run. Maybe he can't. Maybe he doesn't want to. The encounter is brutal and swift, a blur of motion and violence. My dad barely puts up a struggle, as though resigned to his fate. Not that there is anything he can do. The creature that I become is too powerful, too consumed by the wild instincts surging through me. I tear him apart, limb from bloody limb, my hands, no, my claws, rending through fabric and flesh with disgusting ease. The sound of my dad's screams, of tearing fabric and flesh, is drowned out by the animalistic growls that echo through the trees. When it's all over, the red mist that had clouded my vision begins to fade, and the fierce, uncontrollable rage that drove my actions subsides. I'm left standing, my breaths heavy and erratic, in the eerie stillness of the forest. The transformation reverses as quickly as it came on, and I find myself back in my human form. My clothes are ripped to shreds, hanging off my frame in tattered remnants. At my feet lies what's left of my dad, his body torn and unrecognizable. I glance down at my abdomen, expecting agony, but instead find my wound miraculously healed. No sign of the gunshot remains, just a faint scar where I expected a bloody mess. Shock sets in, a numbing disbelief mixed with a gut-wrenching realization of what I've become and what I've done. My hands, now human again, tremble as I look at them, half expecting to see the claws that had so effortlessly ripped through flesh and bone. But there's only blood, my father's blood, against my skin. I stand there for what feels like an eternity, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. Eventually, the shock wears thin, and a cold practicality takes hold. I need to get out of here. I need to cover my tracks, to disappear. Because who would believe this? Who would understand that I didn't choose this, that I'm not a monster by choice? With trembling hands, I do what's necessary. I bury my dad in a shallow grave, the physical act of digging strangely grounding. I cover him with leaves and branches, a pitiful attempt to hide the brutality of his end. I take a moment, whispering apologies into the wind, knowing full well that nothing I say can change what happened. I leave the forest behind, my mind a whirl of dark thoughts. As I walk, the first hints of dawn brush against the horizon, the sky bleeding a soft pink. It's hauntingly beautiful. Third story, the woods. I had an interesting experience tonight, which prompted me to post this. Also, I'm writing this on my phone, so I apologize for any formatting issues. Background. I live in a rural area that is slowly being developed. My house was built on a wooded lot that is fairly dense in an old forest. The trees are very tall, about 2.5 times taller than a two-story home. Also, my neighborhood, if you can even call it that, is just a few houses built on a long gravel road. The entirety of the houses are built within this old, dense forest which extends about a mile in every direction. These homes are only about 3 years old. I take my dog for a walk on the gravel road several times a day, but the night walks tend to me the most eerie. I have come along coyotes that creepily watch us from the woods until I shout at them. Actually, just a couple weeks ago, I walked up on a bear. I have learned to bring a bright 1,000 lumen flashlight on my walks. Now, for the paranormal part. Sometimes when walking the woods can be eerily quiet. Anyone who has spent a good amount of time in the woods knows that the woods are actually pretty noisy. However, on these nights, it's virtually silent. No wind in the leaves. No clacking of swaying tree branches. No crickets. It's on these nights that I hate the walks. I get the sensation that I'm being watched. Sometimes I even get goosebumps because the sensation that we're being watched is so powerful. On occasion, I can hear branches or tree limbs snapping. Now, in thick woods, it's totally normal to hear a random limb break off and fall to the ground. But the sound of a limb breaking naturally versus the sound of one being snapped are very different. Sometimes I can hear branches snapping more frequently than I should, as if several people were hiding in the woods, snapping branches off of trees. Most times, though, I just hear them around me, but I can't find a cause. However, 2 nights ago, I heard the branches snapping again. This was very clearly the sound of intentional branches being snapped, but the sound was coming from high in the treetops. I shined my light, but couldn't see anything, so I kept walking. Then, more branches snapping. I stopped and looked again, but nothing. I started to walk again, then another branch in the treetop snapped again. This time, I just kept walking, and as I did, I could hear the sound of snapping branches in the treetop follow me. This continued for about 2 minutes as I started fast walking to my home, branches being snapped behind me in the trees. Then, tonight, which prompted this story, I again had the weird, uncomfortable feeling, but the walk was uneventful. As I was almost home, my dog was sniffing around a bush. He ended up getting a small branch stuck on his leash. I grabbed the branch and threw it back in the woods, hearing it hit a bush. However, the moment I turned to walk, I heard something behind me, which startled us. I turned around to see the same branch. It was a fairly distinctly shaped branch, almost like a large but skinny wishbone of a turkey, which I just threw into the woods back at my feet. I looked into the woods, but nothing was there. Something had thrown the branch back at my feet. I went straight home after that, completely spooked. It seems that this last week or so that activity has increased dramatically. I'm not sure what to think of it or if there is some precipitating factor. Either way, I hope you guys find it interesting. 4th story, a strange encounter in the woods. I'm a skeptic of the supernatural, but I believe anything is possible. So I won't discount supernatural occurrences if I can't find a logical explanation for them. I have a few incidences that I have witnessed, but couldn't explain. I'm only going to tell the one that freaked me out the most, though. So here it goes. I live in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, USA. A lot of people in the cities have cabins in either northern MN or rural Wisconsin. Our cabin was in northern Wisconsin, a small town called Danbury. The cabin is on Long Lake at the very end of Long Lake Road. Along with the cabin came almost an acre of land of thick forest. We carve a trail trough the land for ATVs and whatnot. So the scene is set. Now about me. I'm an outdoor enthusiast, have been forever. I'm 6 feet 4 inches and fit, and have been a hunter since I was like 12. I know my environment well, I know the wildlife, I know the forest well, and am typically comfortable in the woods. I come from a military family and am trained in multiple forms of combat, armed and unarmed, and I have extensive firearms training. As a result, I am fairly confident in my abilities to defend myself. I'm not really scared of people. Big predators, on the other hand, I'm not a big fan of bears, wolves, man-bear pig, whatever. This brings me to the weirdness. I'm 23 now, but at the time of the incident I was 16. Even at 16, I was a decent hunter, and I generally have good common sense. Anyway, I was at the cabin with my cousin Jay and grandparents. It is middle summer, I think July, hot temps and whatnot. Me and my cousin were shooting at each other with airsoft guns. We had a full-on 1v1 battle going on throughout the property, including the woods, which were my stalking grounds, as I was wearing my BDU with face cover and all, head to toe in camo. Our battle ended up about 100 yards northwest of the cabin into the woods. We ended the war on the main trail and were standing and talking about the events that conspired. And I was still on guard because I always am. I suppose I could be considered a tad paranoid. All right, so we were talking when I noticed something moved on our 12 about 50 meters out. I got quiet and focused dead ahead scanning. Jay was still talking, and I whispered, "Say, he shut up." And to freak him out, I said we're being watched as a joke, because I figured the movement I caught was probably a bird or something, but then I did notice something. It's dead quiet, no bird chirping, nothing. Then I started to think, this only happens when a big predator is around. So I started looking even closer. Then I saw it. On my 12, there was a large animal. It had reddish-brown fur and almost blended in perfectly till I focused on it. It had long front limbs, arm-like, with formidable claws that appeared. It was standing kind of slouched down against a tree like it was trying to be stealthy. It was nearly as tall as me in this state. The only reason why I saw it was because of its teeth. I think it was panting because its whitish teeth were visible. Its snout appeared to be a tad elongated. I couldn't get a better look because my first thought was, we have to go. I said it out loud. Jay was already freaked when I said that he bolted up the trail towards the cabin. He nearly left me in the dust because I was protective of him, and I waited a good 3 seconds and kept my eye on it until I saw it move, and it was fast. Then I ran like hell. I didn't see which way it ran. All I know is I heard it crashing through the woods. Jay stopped at the shed to wait for me, which was still 50 meters from the cabin. When I caught up, I yelled, "Go, go, go." And we both bolted to the cabin and got inside and shut the door. Then my grandma asked why we looked panicked and slammed the door. I knew they wouldn't believe me. So I said we saw a bear, and Jay nodded. Later that night, after the grandparents went to sleep, we talked about it. And I asked Jay if he saw it. He told me that he paused for a second to look back after he ran to see if I was running with him, and he saw me still looking at it. Then he saw it move too, and me run, but mostly he said he only saw a flash of fur. He then said I thought it wasn't the right color for a bear. I told him it wasn't. We only have black bears in the area, and the animal wasn't built right. I said I didn't think it was a bear. He then asked why I lied. I told him they wouldn't believe us. We have kept it between us until now. Still, the animal didn't match any known regional animal profiles in the area. I'm at a loss for what it may have been. I know that it was stalking us, though, and that it was built like an athletic predator, not like a bear, not as heavy set. After the incident, neither of us would go into the woods on foot alone without a gun. We generally only went back in the woods on ATVs from that point forward. I always loved the cabin up until then. Fortunately, the cabin has been sold now. Fifth story, the Dogman. Allow me to preface the story with this. It breaks my heart to see all the stories on Nosleep where the Opie proudly states, "This is my first/second/last piece of fiction." How am I doing? No, you'll be getting none of this from me. This is in part because I feel I'd be doing my own experience a disservice by embellishing it more than I need to in order to make up for lapses in my memory, and in part because I'm truly afraid to fictionalize anything about him, because what if it means he'll come back? To that end, this story is not necessarily linear. I likely should have done it in multiple parts for the sake of length, but I wouldn't even know where to place the breaks. It has a clear beginning, but no clear end, and no moral. I never figured out what he wanted from me. Maybe he didn't either. And maybe, though I hope I'm wrong on this, maybe this story isn't over yet. It started during my junior year of high school. I was, what else? Dicking around on Encyclopedia Dramatica, reading the creepypasta page. Whatever happened to that thing? Coincidentally, what happened next is the reason that I now settle for reading No Sleep. Though the quality of the stories is far less impressive to me overall, I cannot stand anything with pictures. Not anymore. I can't even tell you what the picture really looked like anymore, or what story it corresponded to. It was in various shades of gray, with a strange figure in it, as are many of the pictures on that old page. All I know is that I looked at it for a minute, and it's like it turned into something else. I guess the best way to explain it is like one of those books where you stare through the page, and it morphs into something 3D. Suddenly, what was there took on a new shape and appearance, just long enough for me to get the feel of it. I must have set a world record for how quickly I exited Firefox. And for a long time after, I sat with my head on my knees and alternately tried to remember exactly what I'd seen and picture anything else. It was later that night that I first saw him. It was not so much saw as was forced to see. The image was in my mind for a split second, much like I since learned flashbacks play unbidden for PTSD sufferer. I was just sitting there in the shower, working a knot out of my hair and gazing absently at the tile wall. And there he was. His skin was the soft, weathered gray of an ancient barn wall and entirely hairless. It wasn't so much skin as a flat, smooth color that coated his humanoid frame. I say humanoid because it was hard to use any other description. He was bipedal, but his posture was slightly hunched, certain joints curving in the decidedly wrong direction, and long limbs. My focus was, and would always be, however, on his face. It had a decidedly canine quality, but without much of a nose or muzzle. In fact, his nose and mouth area were mostly in shadow, leaving only the faint impression of thin, crowded teeth below bony nostrils and sallow cheeks. His eyes were enormous and wide-set. They seemed impossibly far back in his skull, dark around the rims, but lighter and lighter until the dilated black pupil. Small, triangular ears added to the dog-like appearance. In one hand, he held what looked like some sort of string instrument, perhaps a variety of violin. He was grinning at me. I don't remember much of the rest of the night, except that I texted my boyfriend until I literally couldn't stay awake any longer. From that night on, for the next 3 years, I slept with the lamp on. But that never helped. He came back anyway. It became such that I could tell when I was going to see him. At some point during the day, a claustrophobic, panic feeling would come over me, and I would know. He never showed up until evening. Then, there he would be. It was always a fleeting glance somewhere, at least at first. I'd look somewhere, and that grinning, vacant canine face would be staring back for just long enough that I could register it. Sometimes I would have the brightness on my computer set too low, and for a moment my own reflection would be replaced with his. Sometimes he was a shimmer across a closed window. Once, I awoke to see his silhouette hunched in front of my bedroom mirror, waiting patiently for me to notice. It was always as though he was staring out of a photograph at me. His presence eclipsed everything around him to where it was impossible to see anything but his dilated pupils and the smooth tops of his cheekbones. Staring. This continued for the entire school year. I figured I must be going crazy. I had scared myself over some creepypasta, and my lack of sleep was making me hallucinate. Other than an anxiety disorder, I was generally mentally healthy. Something must have been pushing me over the edge. So I thought, until other people started to see him. My boyfriend had grown up in Ronan, Montana, on a reservation that was famous for its paranormal events. He was a tall, amber-eyed half-Indian with a strong jaw and a history of going ghost hunting with his buddies up in the hills. Because of all this, I had entrusted him with some degree of what was going on, that I was seeing something that wouldn't go away. His advice was to ignore it. He called me, sobbing, his voice panicked. The clock read 3:42 a.m. Once he calmed down a little, I got the full story. He had been reading in his bedroom. It was in the basement of his mother's tiny house, with the windows just above ground level, when he heard a noise outside. A stringed instrument, almost like a violin, playing a song he thought he recognized. Being a violinist himself, he was intrigued. Had one of his neighbors picked up the instrument too? He had pulled back the curtain to see a hunched, canine figure leering in at him, its ghoulish face inches from his own. The next day, he papered over the basement windows. The trend continued, unstoppable, myself never able to get used to the airless, terrifying feeling before he would appear and the shock of his inhuman face looking right through me. Once, my best friend and I saw him at the same time, his shadow appearing against the off-white wall of her bedroom. Another time, I was at a camp in Traverse City, Michigan, when one of my cabin mates woke me up, shrieking that a dog-like face with enormous eyes had been looking in at her through one of the windows. Yet another time, two of my friends and I were in my living room late at night, when one of them, Tyler, stopped immediately and stared in horror into the guest bedroom behind me. When I asked him what was wrong, he said he'd seen this thing like a gray person, but his limbs were all wrong and looking at a picture on the wall. When we walked into the room and flipped the light switch, I saw the framed drawing Tyler had indicated, a charcoal sketch of a man playing a violin. My friend Harry was alone in his room one night, after he and I had spent several hours discussing the phenomenon, and he heard movement from his lawn and noises that sounded, he said, almost like soft howling and the padding of something on 2 feet. Each time, he seemed to show sooner, stay longer, become more vivid. It was as though he was testing the waters. The last time I saw him was 3 years ago. At my boyfriend's request, I had learned to do energy meditations and agreed to carry around charms he made for me. A handmade leather dream catcher, still fresh with the smoky smell of my boyfriend's house on the reservation, was hung above my bed. His small protections seemed to have kept him safe. I, however, couldn't escape. No matter where I went or what I did, it felt as though the Dogman was watching. I had spent all day feverishly afraid. That familiar, oppressive sense that I would see him soon was upon me. It had gotten to the point by now where I could sometimes tell days in advance. I'd spend hours or days in a state of numb panic, shying away from noises and anything even vaguely reflective. This particular time, I worried that it may have been triggered by the fact that I had been trying to draw his violin earlier that day. I had by now accepted that he was real in some sense and feared that the drawing would attract him somehow. I left it on my desk downstairs and went to my room, regretting having ever started it. The sense was still nauseatingly strong as I readied myself for bed as usual. I closed my bedroom door and sealed it, as I had begun to superstitiously make a habit of doing, placing a carved stone box against the door with a chunk of minerals from the Black Hills balanced against that. In part, this was a way for me to know if my snoopy parents had come into my room in the middle of the night. There was no way to replace the seal from the outside or prevent from moving it when entering. I awoke feeling wonderful, relieved. The sun was streaming in under my curtains, a magpie squawked happily outside, and all seemed at peace. It was miraculous. It was the first time I had felt the feeling and not seen him. I rolled over and saw my drawing of his violin placed next to me on my pillow, the one that I had left on my desk. My seal was undisturbed. I don't know what he wanted from me that night. Perhaps just to remind me that he was still there, still watching. I think of how it must have been him, tall, hunched, grinning, standing over me while I slept, painstakingly setting the smudged watercolor paper next to me, and my heart still skips a beat years later. But more than that, one question makes my blood run cold. I haven't seen him in so long. What is he waiting for? Sixth story. A man in a costume is pretending to be my mom's dog. I haven't heard from my mom in about 3 days. That was around the time her beagle Buster died, and she was really depressed, so I decided to give her some space to cope. So when she called me out of the blue yesterday, sounding all bright and chipper, that was when I knew something had happened. We live in small-town Iowa, a couple kilometers north of Spirit Lake. There isn't much to do to pass the time, and since my dad died and I moved out for college, Mom relied heavily on Buster for company. I finished up my last semester and went back home ready to fit back into life, at least until it was time to go job hunting, and that's when she told me the news about Buster. I tried my best to console her and even promised to get her a new dog, but she wouldn't hear a word of it. Buster was a gift from my dad for their 12th anniversary, so to her, Buster was the last thing that made sense to her, and losing him meant losing my dad all over again. I spent a few nights at her house to try and cheer her up before getting back to my own apartment about 10 minutes away until I got her phone call. The sun hadn't even risen properly above the horizon when I heard my phone rattling on the nightstand. Mikey, you need to get over here right now. You wouldn't believe who came to visit me last night. I had just woken up from a deep sleep, and her loud, energetic tone was a little overwhelming for me. I donned dash. Buster. He must have come in through the doggy door. Although I don't know how, because he's so big now. I paused for a minute, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. I looked at the phone screen to make sure it was my mom and glanced at the time to see it was just 5:05 a.m. Are you sure it isn't another beagle? Could be someone else's dog. Of course it's him. I know my Buster anywhere. Come over and say hi. I wanted to ask more, but between my sleepy haze and obvious confusion, all I managed was, okay. I looked at my phone screen again, unsure if what just happened was a really vivid dream or if my mom had fallen into some psychotic episode. I put on a sweater and slipped on my jeans and sneakers before leaving for her house. All the while, I was genuinely worried about her mental health, and I blamed myself. Dad died around the same time I started school out of state, and he was barely in the ground when I up and left Mom on her own. The more I thought about it, the more likely it seemed that I was the one to blame for all of this, and to make matters worse, I still didn't have a job. As I bent the corner, I half expected to see Buster running around our front lawn as I had seen him before so many times walking home from high school, but there was no dog. Probably inside. I walked up the cobblestone walkway and heard Mom making her ridiculous baby talk that I'd often hear when Buster was still alive. As I walked in through the front door, nothing could prepare me for what I saw as my eyes focused the room. I saw Mom sitting on the couch, as I had seen her 100 million times before with a black mass curled at her feet. As my eyes adjusted to the light of the house, I stood frozen, unable to say anything. Doesn't he look great, Mikey? What I saw was a man 6 feet 8 inches me. He could have been closer to an even 7 feet tall from where I stood, wearing a matte black dog mask and full-body jumpsuit. The man was so tall he almost completely covered the white carpet Mom had laid out on the ground. I don't know where he was, but I'm so happy to have my big man back, Mom said as she pat the man's stomach. I still couldn't move or say anything. Through the eye holes of the mask, I could see the man studying me intently, and a pang of fear struck my chest. He looked as if he was plotting his next move, thinking of what to do. What did I just stumble upon exactly? I shifted my gaze to my mom and saw that she was in her glee. The only time I saw her this happy was when I told her I got accepted to Nebraska State. It felt so sincere and warm it tore me up inside. Then I looked back down to the man and looked at his eyes again through the holes of his mask. I could only see his eyes, but I swore they had the most smug look, as if to say, yeah, I made her this happy when you couldn't. But of course he didn't say anything. He was a dog after all. Dogs don't talk. My God, I had to say something. Mom, what? I blurted out. Of course, that's not exactly the words I wanted to come out, but the shock of the situation sort of chose my words for me. She raised her head and the warm, doting smile melted from her face. What's your problem? Buster's back, can't you see? Mom, who is that? Where did he come from? Mom looked back at me like I had a skull full of shit. This isn't funny, Mikey. You're scaring Buster with your loud talking. My mom wasn't much of a prankster. Come to think of it, she wasn't much of anything. For as long as I could remember, she pretty much lived for her family. Whatever Dad and I liked, she liked as well, but I still held out hope that this was some elaborate joke at my expense. But her eyes and facial expression behind her comically tiny, Looney Tunes glasses made me realize that something was terribly wrong. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I heard it. Whimpers coming from the thing that lay on the ground. Oh, what's wrong, Bussy? Want to go out? You don't? Okay, well, stay inside with Mama. I could feel beads of sweat forming below my hairline in clusters. I didn't know what to do. Do I call the police? Clearly my mom was unwell if she felt this thing was her dead dog. Then, without warning, the man got up on all fours and started growling at me. I felt that pang of fear in my chest again. Harder this time. I clearly couldn't count on my mom for help. So what was I going to do? The man in this suit looked like he had at least 50 pounds on me, and he was clearly deranged. Buster, come back here. Leave Mikey alone. He just wants to play with you, Mikey. He hasn't seen you for so long." Then I could see him tensing up as if to charge. Before waiting, I ran out the open door and back onto the street, not stopping until I got home. As I type this now, it seems ridiculous me running from a grown man in a dog costume, but I don't know. There was something so unsettling about the incident. Clearly it was a man dressed as a dog, but I don't know. His eyes, while they were definitely human, had something else behind them that seemed inhuman and animalistic. I walked back over to my apartment, trying to make sense of what happened all the way. Who was that person? Where did he come from? Was he dangerous? But last and definitely not least, what do I do now? Do I go to the police? Tell them my mom's home has been invaded by a crazed dog man? Even if I did convince them to come to the home with me, what would they have done? I read a story online once where a man out of some strange fetish decided to live out the rest of his days as a horse in California with his wife, now owner, and there wasn't anything the authorities could do about it. Even if the police did something, is that really what I wanted to put my mom through? Between Dad's death and my going away, she clearly had a lot of mental baggage, and a trip to the police station to file a report, assuming she would in the first place, was the last thing she needed. But still, leaving her in there with whatever that was wasn't a solution either. I sat on my bed and thought for a while until I realized I had to do something. I walked back over to Mom's house. The front door still open. Still unsure of how to approach the situation, I pulled out my pocket knife in case things took a turn for the worse. That's when I saw one of my old neighbors, Ms. Johansson, in her patio, looking in the direction of my house. I whistled her over to the sidewalk, careful not to make too much noise for my mom, or Buster to notice. "Mikey, is your mom okay?" "Oh, why do you ask?" She studied me carefully. Well, she's been laughing and giggling really loud, and just before I saw you, she started cursing at someone. "I know she lives alone since you left, so I don't know what's going on. Maybe she had the TV on." The thing is, it's not just that. Last night, I got up to use the washroom, and through the window, I saw a huge dog in your front lawn. It was about the size of a Great Dane. I thought about calling animal control, but who would believe an old coot like me? Who would believe that indeed, I thought to myself, "Thanks, Ms. Johansson. I think maybe you should call the police." Usually Ms. Johansson was the kind of old biddy to ask why, but she sensed the urgency of the situation and hurried inside to call the cops. No sooner had I turned back to face the house, I heard my mom scream. I hopped the wall of the house and walked inside to see the dog man try to mount my mother as she fought back. I tried to focus on what was happening before my very eyes. His growls and snorts together with my mom's screams almost sent me crazy. My fear and shock quickly turned to rage when I folded out the blade from my pocket knife and threw myself at him at full speed. I crashed into him and took him down to the ground in a move reminiscent of my old Pop Warner days as I slipped the knife between his shoulder blades. I could hear him yelp in pain as I grabbed him and began punching the leather mask he was wearing. I heard his animalistic growls again as he lunged forward and bit my forearm. A bolt of pain ran up my right arm as I tried to pry his mouth open from the mask. "Mikey, what are you doing?" was all I could hear from behind me. This guy was strong. I felt him trying to pull me closer with one arm, but I fought back with everything until I heard the police sirens. The most human look of fear washed over his eyes as he opened his mouth and ran on all fours out the open back door and over the neighbor's fence. I was bleeding everywhere, and my mom wore a confused look on her face the entire time. When the police cleared the house and the neighborhood with no reports of a 7-foot-tall man, I wasn't particularly surprised. I deliberately left out the details of the dog's suit. I didn't need the police looking at me, side-eyed. We made a report, as usual, and investigators chalked it up to a homeless derelict who thought he could fit himself into Mom's home. It still didn't answer a lot of questions. For now, Mom is staying with me in my apartment. I have an appointment lined up with a psychiatrist for her the next morning. I love her so much, and I just want to do what's best for her. Well, I should have done all along. I hope this whole episode is over. Reading it about a year from now, it might seem a little less terrifying and a little more funny, but the growling I hear ever so often outside my door as I write this doesn't help ease my mind. Thanks a lot for watching this video till the end. Drop your suggestions in the comment section.